Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, the Security Council has just adopted the Resolution 2118. The Syrian government acknowledges the positive endeavor that led to this consensual language. It is regrettable, however, that some delegations have already started to provide a self-inflicted negative interpretation to the resolution in order to derail it from its lofty purposes. Let me highlight in this regard some points. The resolution reaffirms in its PP2 once again the Security Council commitment to the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic in accordance with the UN Charter. It also recalls in PP1 and in OP14 Security Council Resolution 1540, which calls in its OP1 on all states to refrain from providing any form of support to non-state actors that attempt to develop, acquire, manufacture, possess, transport, transfer or use of nuclear, chemical or biological weapons and their means of delivery. And it also prohibits in OP2 any non-state actor to manufacture, acquire, possess, develop, transport, transfer or use of nuclear, chemical or biological weapons and their means of delivery, in particular for terrorist purposes. The resolution 2118 welcomes the establishment of the United Nations mission to investigate allegations of the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic. Allegations in plural. This mission was formulated initially upon a request of the Syrian government in order to investigate the use of chemical weapon in Khan al-Asal and to identify the perpetrators of this heinous crime. The resolution underscores in its OP5 that no party in Syria should use, develop, produce, acquire, stockpile, retain or transfer chemical weapons. No party in Syria. It also acknowledges the accession of the Syrian Arab Republic to the Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production, Stockpiling and Use of Chemical Weapons and on their destruction. As you are well aware, the Syrian government not only acceded to the Convention, but it also decided to apply the Convention provisionally, pending its entry into force for the Syrian Arab Republic. This proves undeniably the willingness of the Syrian government to cooperate sincerely with the OPCW in implementing the Convention as soon as possible. The Resolution 2118 dealt solely with the political option as the only solution to the crisis in Syria. It recalled in PP1 resolutions 2042, 2043, and it stresses in PP12 that, and I quote, the only solution to the current crisis in the Syrian Arab Republic is through an inclusive and Syrian-led political process based on the Geneva Communiqué, and it endorsed in its OP16 the Geneva Communiqué of June 30th, 2012. As you are all aware, the Syrian government has always supported the approach of finding a political solution to what's going on in Syria, and the Syrian government has always supported all the initiatives to this regard, including the Geneva Communiqué itself. The Resolution 2118 calls upon all Syrian parties to engage seriously and constructively at the Geneva Conference on Syria. And this is a demand of the Syrian government. Let me remind everyone here that this resolution referred explicitly to Article 25 of the Charter, which reads as follows, and I quote, "The members of the United Nations agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the Security Council in accordance with the present Charter," end quote. This means that all states, I mean all states, have to abide by this resolution. All states, including those neighboring countries of Syria who are providing haven and supporting the terrorists and the armed groups into my country. So the Turkish government, the Saudi government, the Qatari government, the French government, the American government, the British government are all held accountable in accordance with this resolution. And they should all abide by this provision. Yesterday, based on what I have just said, I can say that the adoption of this resolution covers most of the Syrian government's concerns. The Syrian government, which has been trying to address the same concerns since the beginning of the crisis. I'm in your hands.
سمعنا من وزير الخارجية السعودي أن على الدول أن تسلح المعارضة أكثر من أجل تحسين التوازن في الساحة في الميدان السوري. ما تعليقكم على ذلك وكيف يؤثر هذا القرار على دول مثل السعودية؟
أنا أنصح وزير الخارجية السعودي بقراءة نص هذا القرار الذي اعتمده مجلس الأمن للتو، فهو يجيب على السؤال الذي طرحت. مشروع القرار 2118 يحظر على أي حكومة سواء في الإقليم في المنطقة أو خارجها أن تساعد الجماعات المسلحة أو الإرهابية ليس فقط على الحصول على السلاح الكيماوي واستخدامه ضد الشعب السوري، وإنما أيضا تحظر على أي حكومة بما في ذلك الحكومة السعودية أن تعمل ضد مسار جنيف. هذا القرار يلزم جميع الدول الأعضاء بتشجيع مسار جنيف بغية عقد مؤتمر جنيف الثاني لتطبيق جنيف الأول.
Yesterday down the hall here, there was a meeting sponsored by France called the Group of Friends of the Syrian People, and it presented Ahmed al-Jarba as the sole representative of the Syrian people. I wondered, do you think that complies with the Charter? What's your view of that meeting and of Mr. Jarba?
Absolutely not. It doesn't comply with the Charter. I forwarded to the Secretary General a most urgent letter before yesterday actually, asking him to rescind this so-called side event, because this kind of activity runs against the provisions of the Charter. And to be honest with you, this side event was hosted by the French delegation, which reads the international efforts in a very surrealistic way. The French diplomacy is rather acting as an amateur rather than as a professional. I also advise the French Minister for Foreign Affairs to read this resolution carefully. By reading this resolution, the French Minister will jump to the conclusion that from now on, neither himself nor his country in general would be allowed to violate the provision of this resolution. This resolution prohibits the French government from inciting to terrorism, inciting to violence in Syria, and prohibits Paris and the foreign minister of France from escalating the military situation in Syria by providing weapons and political support to those who are objecting to the holding of Geneva Conference itself. So the French diplomacy has committed many mistakes. Today, the minister himself, a few minutes ago, was reading his own statement. It seems he didn't get the meaning of this resolution. But also 2-3 days ago, they organized this side event within the premises of the United Nations in flagrant violation of the Charter and of the member states' commitments.
Has the time come for a ceasefire nowadays?
The time has come for a ceasefire a long time ago. The Syrian government called for a ceasefire, not so ceasefire actually, for the end of the violence. This is the right terminology we should use. The end of violence and the immediate positive engagement in the political process that will lead to the Conference of Geneva II. The Syrian government, a year ago, gave the Russian delegation, the Russian government, the name of the Syrian delegation and the composition of this delegation. And we have been waiting for a year so far, and still some capitals exert influence on the so many oppositions, in plural, operating in Syria, not to go to Geneva and not to engage in this political process. From now on, this resolution will hold everybody accountable to the Security Council in case they run against the provisions of the charter of this resolution.